Okay, and with that, we will get to our first, I would say, really meaty topic of today. I'm looking forward to this. The evaluation overview of GC3 brought to us by a spectacular duo, Lambert and Nevins from GSK.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody here. I mean, for the community that's, come together over the past 15 years or so. So I've been told, so we have 90 slides. I've been told I have an hour and a half. No, I'm just kidding. Not kidding about the 90 slides, but we will cover them in 30 minutes. But I'm gonna give a little bit of a brief overview of how we got here. Mill has really done a lot of work of going under the hood for this particular challenge, and I've done. Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. I'm used to moving around. This is okay. And where's the, sorry, I can't see that. This is how do you advance this way?
Oh, the advance is just,
just use this.
Yeah, but this is a laser pointer.
Oh, okay, I don't need that. All right, great.
We need to mute this mic. I don't know how to do that. Is there a microphone on this? Somebody's saying that there might be.
Okay, that's
fine. I don't know.
I think it's here.
Okay. So let me just tell you from a GSK perspective. So back in the early 2000s, there were a lot of companies that were publishing and academics, like we have the greatest docking software, we have the greatest scoring functions. In fact, if the method that works best is to use all the latest scoring functions together and come up with a consensus score, that's going on. And then our senior management was saying, well, you can't actually have all these software packages, you have to make a decision. And we were given permission to actually do an internal docking evaluation. And so we did that, and actually Greg Warren, who's here, Georgia McGoy and I did a docking and scoring challenge, not a challenge, but a symposium in 2004. I think Kathy Pishoff, who was the head of our department at the time, came up and I guess told Greg that we needed to do this. And so we did it. And who was there? I'm just curious. Anyone here who was at the Philadelphia ACS? Got Pat, Mel, okay, a couple people. So 250 people showed up for the symposium, which blew me away. It was 3 days, like what's the state of the art? And it really got us, realizing that we had a lot of work to do. This paper came about in large part because of, well, a lot of us each broke up a program and did a docking challenge against 8 different targets. And a lot of us weren't familiar with the targets, so it was kind of blind in a sense. And then Greg Warren, who's sitting right here in the front row with me, did a lot of work along with Marty Head to sort of take all these results to really get under the hood and to really do a careful study of the work we did, and it was published in 2006. And so this is where things, and this is the basic conclusions that came out of our study, where we can actually predict docking poses. The problem is we don't know which program is going to predict for which target, especially if it's something new that's coming up. The other things that came out was that we actually use these docking programs, but a lot of it's up to the individual who's looking at the program. In fact, one of the programs that the best was Mill's own homegrown docking program that he wrote himself before there were available ones. He was one of the high performers using his own program, which is not necessarily surprising, but doesn't mean that anyone else is going to be able to do the same work as him. We want to extend this, make it broader. We realized right away all these consensus docking scores just weren't cutting it. There was no docking score, no protocol that was actually rank ordering ligands, which is what we really need in pharma. So, I mean, a take-home message I just want to leave with you guys is make sure, when coming to us, it's like there has to be some, we have to sell our senior managers, why should we be spending our time on this? What's in it for us? And I think what's in it for us has to be a driving, force for everybody who's doing this kind of work, but it can be a self-enlightened, the self-enlightened self-interest that that we'll all benefit from all, at the end of the day. And so then 5 years later, I'm like, you know what, we probably need to do another symposium. And I got Greg he probably regrets it to this day, but to do another one of these. And he wanted to do a challenge and actually have all the speakers who come to the symposium actually have looked at the same set of targets and to run their software on them so that when they gave their talks, you could be comparing each talk to the same, that they had actually looked at the same data sets. And I won't go into a lot of detail here, But all the main docking programs were run at the time. They agreed to participate. They all were really grumbled, like, oh, why did I agree? There's a lot of work. But then when they got there, they're like, this was really helpful. And so we did a pose challenge using 85 structures published in the Aztecs data set, and then did a virtual screening with 40 dud targets. And one I think was brilliant that Greg said that the participants had to do was to actually run decoys. So to take for the, you have the actives against the target, and then you had to take another set of, and he told which ones to use, another set of actives against a completely different target, dock them into the target that, you know, where there shouldn't be a correlation. So when we got the post predictions back and looked at them, actually most of the programs did fine for we could fish out the docking pose. So that was actually real progress in the last 5 years. So if you look at the pink crosses and the green triangles, all of them, except for a couple of programs, are above the 70% line. So to RMSD. So that was pretty good. Interesting for the dud set was that they were getting decent AUCs, enriching, but not just for the actives against the actual target, but also for the decoys. So that was also a big piece of learning there, that you really got to do this. You have to have the null model when you look at results. And so these are a lot of lessons learned. These slides will be available. I'm not going to read these off now. And a lot, if you kind of glance at them, you'll see, hey, we're still working on some of these today. So I won't necessarily highlight any of them, but all of them are kind of important. As you know, if you miss the Todmer state, if you don't get the charges right, if you don't, prepare your protein, you're not going to get a good answer. You got to get everything right to get the right answer most of the time. So CSAR, I actually kind of checked out for a while. I wasn't really following CSAR, although my colleague, Lambert, has been actively involved the whole time. And so these were what I pulled out from the paper. And I'm not sure I agree with everything, but the good crystal structures are hard to find. I'm going to touch on that in a minute. And the statistics and error bars, I think, are really, and Ann Nichols has done a lot to sort of champion that, as well as Pat Walters. Please stop using factor 10A as a model system. It was interesting to me when I went back and looked at the paper. What she was saying was that when you have, some flexibility in your protein, and there's a lot of it's solvent exposed, Cathepsin S is a similar target, that, it might be hard to predict these. I wouldn't necessarily throw them out, but I think you're uncovering some of the problems we have with sampling the protein, sampling the ligand, solvation. I think these are good. These are the highly challenging problems that are going to actually help us get, hopefully, to better methods. And I want to really call this out here, this particular paper, because Greg did a lot of work. And if you haven't read this paper, you need to read this paper. And there's a lot of grad students here. Read this paper. So what he did was went through, I think, a few popular data sets that were used for docking scoring up to 2011. And he actually looked at every single one of them. And basically, most of them had to be chucked because either the structure factors weren't deposited, so you had no idea the quality of the structure, or they were deposited, and then he looked at the results, and there were a lot of problems with them, and so he broke them out into, I think, high, medium, and maybe low quality. And so out of like 800 structures, only 115 were left that he would consider high quality, with maybe another, I can't remember, 70 maybe were medium quality. And so we've really got to, here were the high points of his recommendations. And I mean, Greg's gone and given a lot of talks on this. So don't make him mad and ask a question that has been covered by this, any of these points here, because these have been covered over and over again. Of all these things that you really need to do, tautomerization, ionization state, your hydrogen positions in the binding site, you've got to get those right to be able to make the prediction. Does the ligand have complete density? I just want to call that out. You've got to check that if you're going to use it in evaluation. If your density is missing, then how you're fitting to something that's not even there. And then he's given some nice talks on difference between resolution and coordinate precision. And really, again, keep that in mind. But high resolution or 3 angstrom resolution could still be okay. And he goes into a number of details, and I'll leave that for now. How long have I been talking? Okay, so just 2 more minutes. I'm going to turn this mostly over to Mill. Is that here is just a plot we've regenerated based on the original paper of docking versus experiment. And then FEP came along and published this. And so it looks like there is some signal, but if you sort of collapse into the relevant region, it starts to look a little more scattershot, although there is definitely signal there. And that is, we're spending a lot of effort now on FEP at GSK. We're spending money and time using this method because it actually has been, you know, plus or minus 2 kcal per mole. For most part, if you use it within what's called the domain of applicability. So if you use it on the right sets, it actually gives that kind of result consistently. So I just wanted to give a little bit of an introduction to cathepsin S and then and a couple of points that I noticed when I looked at the set. So cathepsin S is a cysteine protease. So it's binding a peptide. It's a catalytic. It's an enzyme. There's a covalent interaction with the peptide to cleave. I'm sort of showing you. Maybe this is where I do need the pointer. If it works, if I can get it to work, I'm sure it works. So here's the S1 pocket, the catalytic cysteine. The triad is comprised of the histidine, this glutamine, and the cysteine. And so these are just nomenclature, S1, S2, S3 for the regions of the pocket where the first residue of P1, P2, P3 of the peptide, which would go across the site here. And so it was interesting that this is a challenge with non-covalent ligands and using a cysteine to serine modified protein, which is fine, but just if you knew this is a cysteine protease, it might affect how you would do the docking. Whoa, I just went to the end. I don't want to do it that way. I'm going to go from the, I keep hitting the end button. This is not a, and then I show this is just the surface of the pocket. If you look at the pocket, it's very solvent exposed. This is a tough challenge, just for anyone who took this on. It's a really, really tough challenge. This is a picture. I just took 2 ligands, 5 best poses. You know what? This to me looks like, whoops. Oh, God. To me, looks like that. So, and I mean, this is one of the, and again, this is why this is, I think, such a challenging problem. These are the ligands that you can see from the ligand, there's the weight, molecular weight's really high, high heavy element count, large rotatable bond count. To do this without any knowledge at all is almost impossible. But I see that protein-protein interaction targets, people go after them with ligands like this. You get ligands like this, and these can be very hard to develop. But this particular challenge, though, when I looked in the literature, I just took all those ligands and looked for something similar, and this one popped out immediately. Very, very similar. So if you had this starting structure, you could get most of the poses right just from that structure without even having to do any docking. So, you know, and luckily in this challenge, you said whether or not you used existing data. And everyone who did not use existing data did not do very well. And it's not surprising. I don't blame you. You can't put a spaghetti on the wall in this particular challenge.
There it is again.
There it is again. I'm going to have to use the mouse. Well, I'm not used to using a.
Yeah.
Do whatever you. I'm going to use the mouse. Use the mouse and don't.
Yeah.
So just what I noticed on the, because the end button is right next to the. Yeah, just use the mouse. So we've got, and you can actually see this. So I'm not going to use the laser pointer. This is even better. So when I started looking at some of the density of the structures, like on some of these, like here, there's on the ligand, I noticed there's a lot of missing density on this benzyl. And then you look over here, you see a lot of green here, this morpholine, there's extra density. It just doesn't look right. It's kind of mushed into there. And then if you look over here, there's density for the symmetry unit right next to the ligand. And so this would be the wrath of Greg right there. It hits 3 problems right in a row. Here's another different structure. Again, get Greg, because you look at that, this chain is packing right up against, and there's another ligand packing right up against this ligand. Not all of them are, I'd say about half of them have this kind of a problem, and they all have it a little bit to some extent. So it's just something, it's not that you can't use the data set. You've got decent density, like that's not really missing. It's just a very, very large ligand. But you just have to be aware of this when you're, doing the challenge. And then here was another, was interesting to me. So if you look at these structures here, these are just 3 different conformations of this particular group. So if you're having to fit this, I would say you shouldn't really have to fit this part of the molecule, although this part looks okay. like this part's great, and this part has a little bit of variability over here as well. So again, if you're using RMSD on one pose, you've got a lot of, you can get a lot of error. So with that, let me turn over to Mill to go over some of the insights he had. Sorry for the button. Yeah, use the mouse. Definitely use the mouse pointing there for the dancing.
Right. So thanks, Lisa. It's a good overview of the cathepsins. Before I start, I should say, as Lisa pointed out, we've got 90 slides here. Yesterday, Mike expressed concern, and he reminded me of how long the slot is. But anyway, we've got it organized so that I can bail out at multiple points if we have to. Just wave your arms if it's going too long. I basically organized this part of the talk so it starts with the cathepsins and moves towards systems for which we have basically less to say, so we can drop that stuff if we have to. Anyway, I'll go as fast as I can. As you can see, so this table basically is an outline of the challenge, similar to what Romy presented earlier. It's also an outline of my talk, my part of the talk. A big part of it, obviously, is cathepsin S. There's also the kinase challenges. This column shows the number of compounds with IC50s, over 1,000, the number of compounds with crystal structures. These are all for cathepsin S. We don't have any crystal structures for the kinases. The first row, each row describes a challenge, basically. The first row describes a challenge where participants are supposed to dock the 24 crystal structures back into a crystal structure. And you had 52 submissions, 52 submission packages, which is a lot of interest. That's not actually 52 different people, because some people submitted multiple predictions, but I think it's a substantial degree of interest. I counted 465 total submissions across this whole challenge. So let me just, to save time, I'm going to just go straight into stage 1A for cathepsin S. Basically, D3R provides smiles for 141 compounds and 2 effectively empty crystal structures. Basically, participants have to dock into that. The compounds are in basically 2 chemical series. Most of the compounds are in this tetrahydropyridopyrazole. I'm not that accustomed to saying that either. Series. A couple more are in this pyridinone-like series. They're similar in the sense that the left arms and right arms across the 2 series are similar. There's actually only 2 compounds in the pyridinone series. They're both very similar to each other. They're included, I think, because you had crystal structures. So with the other series, we've got 22 crystal structures. I'm showing all the structures here. So you can see there really are commonalities. These are all in the same orientation. There's, of course, variation in the arms, but they're basically similar. This is all of the pyrazole structures superimposed. This gives you an idea of the degree of similarity among these compounds in terms of how they bind to the protein. It's a little cleaner with the surface. I'm throwing 3 of them away here. You'll see why later. So I want to focus. This is something Lisa's already alluded to. There were crystal structures already in the PDB prior to the challenge. This compound, except maybe for a stereoisomer at the hydroxy group, was one of those that was in the PDB prior to the challenge. So participants could have predicted the structure basically by just laying it on top of this. Lisa mentioned that my program, MVP, did well in challenge work that we did back in 2002. My program actually works largely by applying distance constraints that effectively put your compound that you're trying to dock onto a pre-existing scaffold of some sort. So at the time, we had lengthy discussions about whether that was cheating or not. I think most people thought it was, but they included it in the paper anyway. That's one of the reasons why I think subsequently we've seen that methodology, which everyone in the pharmaceutical industry uses. We all use it. If you have the data, it's the easiest way to dock compounds. We use this every day. So my program just implements common sense, basically. So we had that crystal structure prior to the challenge. This is what you get. This is what the submitters predicted in stage 1A for that one compound. And so you can see a lot of them are not using the template-based approach. That's great, right? We don't want everybody just planting it on top of that same crystal structure. We want to see some variation, and that's what's going on here. That's not the best way to get a good RMS deviation, obviously. So, okay, and that brings up the question of RMS deviation calculations. These were done by Connor Parks as a postdoc here and Pat Walters separately. They did them completely separately and compared them after doing the calculations using maximum common subgraph algorithms after first superimposing the protein onto a standard orientation. I guess I have to mention this. Our group I told him that we were still working on this less than a week ago, and his reaction was RMS calculations. I thought that was a solved problem. It's harder than you think in this case. I won't go into it. Pat will probably address this. So with these submissions, you have 24 crystal structures. That means you have 24 RMSD values. We can't deal with 24, so we report something, a median, a mean, something like that. For this talk, I'm going to be using medians. So this is what the results look like. For stage 1A, the best submission package was this one with a median RMSD of 1.7 angstroms. Considering how floppy these compounds are and how surface exposed it is, that's really good. There's maybe a dozen submission packages that are generally in the same ballpark. And then there's submission packages where they miss it by 10, 11, 12 angstroms. I think we understand why. It just depends on whether you included information from the prior crystal collections or not. This is coloring by the submitting group. And you can see there's a lot of different groups that submitted. This is the top scoring in terms of RMS, and I'm going to color them red consistently throughout this presentation because it turns out they did really well across multiple challenges. I am not going to identify who these submitters were, but they're welcome when in fact, this person, the head of that group will be speaking this morning, they're welcome to identify themselves if they choose. You'll see, other groups, you'll see the colors recurring. So some of the better groups showed up repeatedly. We're interested in, aside from RMS deviations, we're also interested in the potency and the way you judge a potency prediction for a bunch of compounds. Obviously, there's a correlation coefficient. I do not want to get into the Spearman versus Kendall versus that argument. I like Spearman. Well, here I am getting into it, aren't I? The reason I like the Spearman is because I think we've all got years and years of experience with the Pearson and the Spearman, and we just kind of have a sense of what's a good value and what's not a good value. I don't have any experience with Kendall. It's probably way better. I don't know, but anyway, this talk will be Spearman. Like I said, the values were calculated by Pat Walters and by Ziad. I hope I pronounced that right. And yeah, this is critical to the whole evaluation. So here are the results. The top scoring group got a Spearman of 0.63. Ziad calculated error bars using a bootstrapping approach, and which I don't fully understand, but it looks to me like that top scoring method is probably statistically better than most of the other methods. If you color the error bars according to the methodology used, it turns out that there were some ligand-based methods that did pretty well. These are actually machine learning methods, and this is a recurring theme in this challenge that usually we think that it's going to take structure-based methods or free energy perturbation to get good scoring, but in this challenge, we're seeing that machine learning is starting to do pretty well. Colored by the submitting group, again, this one group, which is colored red, seems to lead the pack. So back to the predicted structures for compound number 11 and the crystal structures for 19 of the 22. What I want to do is simplify the picture. So this is the tetrahydropyridopyrazole from the crystal structures, from those 19 of the crystal structures. And what you'll see is across those 19 crystal structures, it doesn't move around that much, right? It's pretty much the same position and orientation. So we can do the same thing with the predictions. Here are the predictions. Let's lop off those substituents and just look at the central scaffold. And what you see is, I think there's a concentration of a lot of scaffolds right here where they should be based on the prior crystal structures. but there's also scaffolds that are scattered through the enzyme active site cleft, which is what we expect and what we wanted to see, actually, given that a lot of the methods are energy-based. So now we have, in the challenge, we have both RMSD information and potency information, and in particular the correlation coefficients. I can color things based on the correlation coefficient that a particular structure shows for, that a particular submission package has. I can color anything, right? As long as I can link it back to a particular package. So I can do that in this case. So here I've colored the scaffolds, the poses that are predicted based on how well the encompassing package did in terms of predicting potency. And what I was hoping to see is like all the red ones would be here and like white ones would be scattered around. That's not what happened. So what I'm seeing instead is that you got pink ones for lots of totally wrong predictions of this scaffold. And unfortunately, that's another recurring theme with docking, which I don't understand, but there you have it. Now it gets better if you just focus on the top 5. So take the out of the 50 or so submission packages, look at the 5 that did the best in terms of correlation coefficient, the best prediction of potency. Look at those, and 4 of the top 5 got the pose right. Okay, so that's reassuring. It's a little bit disconcerting, perhaps, that one was able to do as well as these other 4, despite having an incorrect pose, but at least it's just one. And then this was the one that I keep highlighting without saying who it is. This is the best submission package overall. And of course, they nailed the pose prediction for the scaffold, which is good. So back now to the 22 compounds in this chemical series. It turns out that 3 of those compounds adopt a what I will call a flipped binding mode. This is why I have the water. So let's go to the crystal structures. And this is the crystal structure. This is the crystal structure. The three crystal structures that I'm saying are flipped. Okay, they don't look that much different here, but if you go to the scaffold, all right, look at that. You can see that it's flipped. Now it still lets the substituents kind of go in the same direction, but they're different substituents that are going in those directions. So anyway, there it is. That's one of the 3. That's the actual crystal structure. Once again, the spaghetti picture, this is the predictions for that particular compound, which are all over the map. Remarkably, perhaps, this was, of all the ones I looked at, this was the one that looked the closest. So somebody got it right, which to me is pretty impressive. Remember, we had crystal structures for the unflipped structures, which one could just, you just lay your compound on top of that and get it right. There was no precedent for this structure as far as I know. So this was a totally blind challenge buried within a mostly blinded sort of set. And some people got it right. So I was very impressed by that. This is the overall best prediction set of the whole challenge, and they got it wrong. So they're not perfect. But that's what you would expect, because if you're doing template-based docking, you're gonna be led astray, right? You're gonna do it wrong. This is murky. I won't even talk about that since we're trying to save time. I was trying to understand who got, why some people got it right and some people didn't, and it didn't make sense. So I won't talk about it. Stage 1B, 5 minutes. It's going to speed up, I promise. So this is the stage 1B where the crystal structures are released minus the inhibitor coordinates. Basically what happened was the top participants did better. So they improved their RMSDs. It didn't really make any difference for these submitters. Overall, there's not a big difference between stage 1 and 1A and 1B, except for the very top participants. I mean, I think if you're close, it mattered. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. Stage 2, of course, you're releasing the full coordinate set. There's no docking involved now. You don't have to do docking. These are the correlations. Again, that one group is at the top. You'll notice that some colors are repeated multiple times. What's happening here is that some participants are submitting multiple predictions, some of which do really well, and some of which don't do so well. This is just compared with stage 1A. Okay, so this is my favorite plot. I had to get to this. When we're looking at a docking methodology, we care about the potency as well as the pose. So what we tried to do here was combine the two on one plot. I won't go through the manipulation. There's some problems, sort of, but basically a good docking algorithm should have a low RMS and a high correlation, and that's achieved by this one method and nearly so by several others. It's never clear to me what's going on over here. The free energy subset, this was a subset of 33 compounds selected by the organizers that would be suitable for free energy calculations. Stage 1A, stage 1B, no, stage 2. Put them together. It's the same set of compounds, so it's valid to put them together. Stage 2 does a little better than stage 1. What surprised me here was not the results, but the algorithm. So if you dig through the protocol files, what you find is that these are mostly not FEP. We thought they would all be FEP. They're not. It's mostly machine learning and MMPBSA and cases where I didn't know what it was. I didn't pull up the journal reference. So, and all right, here's something interesting. It's a crystal structure from that same free energy set. There's the Dock's pose. If you look at it closely, it's flat. It's like totally 2D. It's buried inside the protein. I had to make the surface transparent so you can see it at all. What's happening here is that this is a machine learning method, and there's no receptor information involved. It's just strictly ligand based. Because of the submission process in the free energy subset, they were required to submit a pose. I can see there's a lot of sympathy here for the, but anyway, so the pose was there, but it just confounded me when I first ran into it. Now here's where we are in the talk. It seems like it seems like with 2 minutes left, we're in bad shape. But the remaining part of the talk is kinases. I don't actually have that much to say about the kinases because they're mostly, we don't have crystal structures. I'll just briefly run through more of these bar chart plots. You'll notice that this red group tends to be at the front. Different groups, though, are coming in second and third. This is so some of these look like they're beautifully designed sets. I wish we had more time to dig into it and to talk about it. Maybe we will eventually. This is a set that almost nobody could get, but there were 2 groups that did get it. So I think there's something interesting going on. Free energy methods did not do well. Another design set, interesting results, I think. This is a small set of compounds, only 6. Here's a set with only 4 compounds. I'm disappointed that I didn't see a correlation of -1 because when you have that few compounds, there's a good chance you'll get a correlation of -1. They came close. This is the mutagenesis challenge. Most people got it. All right, see, this is the last slide. So Anissa and I struggled with this, and she's already alluded to some of it. I think, so our conclusions, at least for the docking and scoring, are up there at the top. And she's kind of mentioned some of this. I think we agree that this challenge is not the greatest. I mean, particularly the cathepsin S is not the best challenge for energy-based and free energy type methods. It's a great challenge for machine learning methods and template-based docking because you've got crystal structures to work with. You've got a lot of data that's already been published, even like 3 SAR papers from Janssen with the same chemical series. Is perfect for machine learning type approaches. So I think that's what we're seeing. That's what's happening here. And then, I mean, although there is buried within the set a lot of interesting stuff that we just don't have time to go through. I can stop now, or we can talk about the suggestions.
I think we can talk about the suggestions tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, it fits in better tomorrow. So let's stop it here then. I do have acknowledgements, but I think I mentioned it as we were going through. So that's it.